Project Darios is a compilation of instructional videos for project managers and project controllers. It's an instructional video set that demonstrates how Microsoft Excel can be used to create an integrated project controls method. This first instructional video demonstrates how a basic risk register could be produced. Please enjoy the video. I hope you find it useful, and just get in touch if there's any ways you can see to make this better, and if you want to collaborate with me going forwards. Thank you. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. What I'd like to do is actually demonstrate how easy it is using Excel, just Excel, to create a mini risk register. This one's just got 5 columns to start with, and you could use those 5 columns standalone to facilitate risk discussion, but I'm also going to show you how to expand them out to create some cost scores and some schedule scores. So the first thing I'm going to do is create 5 columns. Let's just bring this back to normal sort of column width. I start over here. So let's just put 5 columns in there. For example, I'm going to have an ID, a name, get the spelling right, description, mitigating actions, and an action owner. Let's put a space in there. Okay, so that's the basic 5 columns of a risk register. And if I go up here and I highlight just by clicking in the corner there and highlighting all the cells, and then I just click in between any of the cells that we're interested in, and it's going to automatically size those columns for me. The other thing to do at this stage is to turn this into a table, which will make any formulas you create automatically populate the rest of the table. So let's just put that in and give ourselves a bit of room in the table. There's some entries. Let's open that up, and then you click on Insert. Yeah, so this forms the basics of a basic risk register that could be used to facilitate individual risks. They've got a description of what they are, and the important thing is there's some mitigating actions in there and action owners that can facilitate, I don't know, a daily, a weekly, a monthly project risk discussion. So that in its own right will facilitate risk discussion and mitigating actions, which would go a long way in preventing any issues developing in the project. But what we can also do is expand this to get some scores, in terms of what does it actually mean in terms of cost to the project, what does it actually mean in terms of a time impact to the project. Yeah, and these things are important when setting out in a project to determine, how much budget to allocate to risk and how much time should be allocated to the schedule to allow for any unexpected overruns. So let's put these in as their basic elements then. We're going to have an impact cost, a cost impact. A probability, calling it cost impact probability. We're going to have a schedule impact. Schedule impact probability. Excuse my spelling. Okay. I want to insert some columns now so that I can get a score for the cost impact and the probability. Remember just to expand things out so we know what we're looking at by selecting everything and clicking in between any of the columns. That's going to expand things out to a size that matches the areas determined by the size of the titles. So let's insert a score for the cost and for the schedule. So to do this a little bit different, I'm now inside the table itself. I'm going to right click in there and I'm going to say insert a column to the left. Let's put a blank column into the left where it's going to put my cost score. I'm going to do something similar now at the end. I'm going to say insert a column to the right. And now I've got a score column for my schedule. So let's title them accordingly. So I'm going to say cost impact score. Then I'm going to say schedule impact score. A better title for these may be to call it factored cost impact, factored cost schedule. Okay, so once again, if I go up to the very top left of all the cells, click in between any of the columns, and it's going to resize. So I've got a nice table there to work with. Okay, so now we've got the main columns in there. We need to do a little bit of formatting so that we can work with these columns. So, for example, costs and factor costs are going to be a currency. Probabilities are going to be percentages, and anything schedule related. For the purpose of this register, I'm just going to call a number. That could be a number of weeks or a number of months. Okay, so you need to determine that at the start of the project what that's going to be. But in order to get the formatting correctly, what I'm going to do is highlight on my cost columns first of all, where it's going to be currency. So I'm just going to highlight the entire column there for cost impact. I'm going to hold down Control and do the same for factored cost impact. And then I'm going to use this shortcut button here, which it changes it to accounting. Okay. And then for the cost impact probability, again, I'm going to highlight everything, and that's going to be a percentage. So I'm going to use that shortcut button there, which is percentage. For the schedule, remember I said it was going to be numbers. We're talking about here for numbers of weeks or months, which is up to you to determine. So again, I'm going to select schedule impact, and I'm going to select the scheduled, the factored cost schedule, and I'm going to call that a number. And then for the impact probability, I can just use this percentage button here. And that's going to get everything in the right format, so we can then start entering data into this table. Okay, so I've pre-populated this table now with a couple of examples. I think one of the key takeaways from what I've done here is the use of wrap text. So I typed a few examples in, a few example risks, and then I used the wrap text function. I sized the column roughly to what it should be, then said wrap text, and it made sure that text didn't move on to additional columns, but it was all wrapped within the same column. Okay, and then I put in a few examples. I put in some risks, I put in action owners, I put in some cost impacts, and I just put in some percentage probabilities. Okay, so let's just talk through some key points here. We won't go into it in great detail, but put in a risk that affects largely cost. And I used what's called cause and effect language. And the important thing here to remember is to use this sort of language to think about how you describe the risk. You should use the terms as a result of, there is a risk that, resulting in. Okay, so the risk, that's cause and effect language there. and you should try and use that for all of your risks to make sure you capture, what is happening, what risk does that cause, and what would it result in if the risk materializes. So again, as a result of, there is a risk that resulting in. Okay, so I put in, so it's actually known as cost impacts and percentages. So let's test now that we need to put some formulas in here now. Okay, so to get my factored cost, it's going to be the cost impact times the cost impact percentage. Okay, cost impact probability. Let's just open these up a bit because they've got hidden. Okay, so this one here is going to be equals cost impact times cost impact probability. Enter. And you can see what I was saying about the use of a table. It's pre-filled in the row below as well, because I'm working in a table. So if I get the formula right above, it's going to copy it down. So I didn't do a schedule impact for this one, but what I do is expand that. I'll do the formula in there anyway, so I know that it will work for any formulas going downwards. So factored cost schedule equals schedule impact. Yeah, bear in mind there's nothing there, but bear with. Times schedule impact probability. Enter. And it's pre-filled my my schedule score on the column on the row underneath it. Okay, so a little bit of tidying up here we can do. You can see it's put the weeks to decimal points. We're going to round that for simplicity. In order to do that, you can just highlight the columns that are affected, and then you can go over here to these decimal points. You can increase or decrease the decimals. So I'm decreasing the decimals to get rid of factoring there. Okay, so you can see, let's say this is weeks here of schedule impact. You can see it's rounding now. I've said 8 weeks, it's going to round, so I've got a 4. 50% of 8 weeks is 4. Okay, so there's a few examples in there for cost and schedule impacts. The other thing to remember to put in there is to get the action owners in place and to get some mitigating actions in place. Right, now we've identified some risks. It's very important that we actually put some justification around how we came to these numbers for the cost impact and the probabilities, so that we can explain that to the project sponsor, whoever the ultimate sign-off is on the project for cost and schedule. So there needs to be the justification in there, a record of how you got to those numbers. And there also needs to be some mitigating actions in there. So I won't dwell on it too long, but for the euro exchange rate risk, we assign the PM to initially identify suppliers who trade in euros and conduct an initial assessment. Now, he or she came back with 3 suppliers can only trade in euros. If the exchange rate continues at its current trend, the worst case trend, the impact will be 10k in a month's time. Okay, so we then looked at that as a team and we said, well, look at the trend. We don't think it's going to be necessarily carried down this downward spiral at that angle, but there's a 90%, erring on the side of caution, there's a 90% probability that it will. We come to a factored cost estimate of 9k. Okay, so we've got a nice clear initial mitigating action in there with some justification. We've done the same for the availability of silicon. We said, as the initial mitigating action going out to the supply chain, we said identify what products will be supplied containing microchips and conduct an initial assessment. Okay, so supply chain have had a look at that, have come back and said one major supplier identified that use microchips. They cannot guarantee stock will be available in 1 month, and the likely restock would take 8 weeks. They also went on and identified an alternative part is readily available, but the cost to incorporate it into the system design would be approximately 10K. So based on that, we've said, there's a 50% chance we're going to need to go to redesign. We might come under stronger time pressures. We need to just go with this alternative part. So you said 50%, 5K, and then we've looked at this schedule risk. If we decide we've got a little bit more time on our hands, or we're going to accept this, there's going to be an 8-week scheduled delay risk at 50%. We can put that in there like that. 50% would be a 4-week risk. So that captures the availability of silicon risk in both terms of cost and schedule. A couple of things we can do here is later on when we might do some more complex things with this register. And when you're working with data, it's very easy to make a spelling mistake when you're typing in an action owner, for example. And when you've only got maybe 4 or 5 owners, you can use something called data validation. So I'm going to show you what that is now. I'm going to take these out for the time being, the PM and supply chain. So we'll remember those. But if I now select this column and I go into the data category, and then I go into data validation, I've got this data validation tool here. And I'm going to look for a list of owners now. And to do that, I'm going to allow, and I'm going to select list from the drop-down menu. And then I'm simply going to list out my owners. Okay, you can change this later, but we know we had PM there as an owner. We know we had supply chain. We could also have engineering lead. Okay, so there's 3 there to start off with, and that can be increased as needed. So I'm going to OK that. Now what this does is this provides a drop down in this action owner box, and it's going to limit the choices that we have as an action owner. So for this one, the euro exchange rate, we put onto the PM, so I can select that. For the availability of silicon, we'd put onto supply chain. So that's going to prevent, when we're dealing with data, this is going to prevent any spelling mistakes, so that when we sort data, we're going to make sure we capture everything with the appropriate owners. Okay, so what I've done here is I've just expanded this slightly in order to show a cost score, and that's a score between 1 and 5 for both cost, and also a schedule score between 1 and 5. And the reason I've done that is so that we can rank the risks in order of severity, and that can be useful when we run a report. So what I've done also is I've created some tables that scoring is based on. Okay, so before I go into the tables, I'm going to do some tidy ups, a bit of housekeeping on the table, because it's starting to get big and it's starting to get a little bit difficult to use in its current format. So I'm going to just rearrange things. So I'm going to organize things in terms of cost and schedule. And you'll see justification comments are going to move out to the end. Don't worry too much about that at the moment. So in order to move columns around, what you need to do is grab just inside the column box. So if I'm sorting by cost, I've got a cost impact, then I'm going to want to stick my cost probability next to that. So you see I've grabbed it in between the columns there, and I'm now moving it across. You know if it's worked if you get that sort of T kind of shaped bar between the rows. in green there. You see that moving across. So I'm going to drag that to where I want to put it between. And that's going to put my cost impact probability next to my cost impact. And then I want to put my factored cost impact next to that. So to do that again, I'm grabbing there and I'm moving my factored cost impact across. And then I'm going to leave my cost score, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, how to get those formulas in. So I'm going to do a similar thing for schedule. So I've got a schedule impact, a schedule probability, and a factored schedule and a score. That's looking good. And you can see at the end of all this, I've put an overall risk score. And what that's going to do at the end is it's going to total up the schedule score and the cost score to produce an overall risk severity score associated with the individual risk. And that will enable us to scale and to run reports. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to calculate these cost impact score and schedule impact score, and then at the end these scores will be added together to produce an overall risk score for each individual risk. I'm going to do that using lookup tables. Okay, so I've created these two lookup tables down here, one for cost and one for schedule. This is a very important thing to do at the start of the build of the risk register, is to determine your scaling and how each cost, for example, corresponds to a score between 1 to 5, and how each delay value, that could be in weeks or months, corresponds to a corresponding score between 1 and 5. Okay, so lookup formula uses named ranges. Okay, and it's going to look across at the minimum values, and from the value entered, it's going to be able to determine the corresponding score. So there's 4 named ranges we need to create for cost minimum range and cost score, schedule minimum range and schedule score. So there's 4 named ranges we need to produce in order for these formulas to work. Okay, so in order to do that, you just highlight the cells within the range, and then you simply go up to the named box and you name the range. So I'm going to call that cost mins. It's very important when you create these names not to put a space between the words, or it won't recognize it as a named range. You're not allowed to put spaces in. Okay, so I'm going to call that cost mins, and for the score, I'm going to call that results. I'm going to say that I'm going to call that cost results. Okay, and similar for schedule, I'm going to call that schedule mins or shed mins, and for the score, I'm going to call that shed score. So there's 4 named ranges now that I can use. So this is the formula I'm going to use. I'm going to copy that formula up into the impact score box. So we're doing it for cost. Okay, so because I had a hyphen in front of the formula, it's copied the hyphen as well and presented as text. If you get rid of that hyphen, it will treat the values as a formula. Okay, so it's got the formula in there. It doesn't recognize anything because it needs some values. It needs to know where it's getting the values from. Okay, so the lookup value in this case is going to be the factored cost impact. The minimum range is going to be the cost mins named range that we created. So in order to do that, just start typing the name of the named range and you'll see it come up. So there's cost mins in there. Just double click on that. And then the results is going to be my results named range. So again, just start typing cost and you can see cost results named ranges come up. Okay. So we can see that that's worked. It's got a cost impact of 9,000 from the table, we can see that that would represent a score of 1. And we can see that it's not copying the formula down at the moment, but if you just drag that formula down, it will copy it down to the remainder of the cells. The reason you're getting these NA values here is because there's no value to use, so it's producing NA, and that looks quite ugly in a table. So in order to get rid of that, we can use an if statement, which says if there's no text, then display no text. Okay, so we're going to use that combined with the lookup formula we've just entered. So I'm going to go to the start of the formula, and I'm going to say if, open brackets. The logical test is that the factored cost impact equals speech marks, okay? Then the value of true is speech marks, essentially saying display nothing if there's nothing in the box you're evaluating. Okay, and then the value of false, it will just carry on with the formula we had before. One thing to look out for though is that you can see in this formula we've got brackets around the lookup formula, but we had an opening brackets on the if statement. We haven't closed that off, so make sure any opening brackets are closed off. And it's quite good because it will show you as a black bracket, it will mirror the black bracket at the start. You can see there's 2 red brackets going around the last formula, the last part of the equation. So if we enter that, and we can see that it's now got rid of the text underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same for the schedule impact score. Okay, so now that I've got my cost impact score and my schedule impact score, I can create an overall risk score up here. So that's just a simple sum equals sum of the cost impact score, comma, schedule impact score, comma, bracket, sorry. And there I get my total score. It follows with zeros, and we can get rid of those. It's a slightly different if statement because we want it to display nothing if there's nothing in the cost impact score and there's nothing in the schedule impact score. Otherwise, we want it to display the value. So in order to do that, we use a combination of the if and the and statements. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to say equals if, then and then it's going to say is the cost impact score equal to nothing, quotation marks, and the next part of the and statement is the schedule impact score equals nothing, quotation marks. Okay, so that closes off the and statement. Now this is the if test, so if both of those statements are true, we want to display nothing, comma, and if the value is false, then it carries on with the formula in the normal way, and it just adds the 2 scores together. So remembering what we said in one of the earlier slides, we need to make sure the number of brackets is the same. So I'm going to close it off with a bracket, and we can see I've got a black bracket now at the start and the finish. All my other brackets are contained, so that formula is going to work. Okay, and you can see it's got rid of those zeros now because in those conditions there's no text in the schedule impact and the cost impact. So it just cleans up that table nicely. So the other things I'm going to do is do a little tidy up at this stage with the table, just to make things easy on the eye. I'm going to do a little bit of formatting. I'm going to right click in here, format cells, and I'm going to use the automatic line style. and I'm going to put lines inside and outside the table. Okay, it just makes it easier to distinguish where the cells are, where the data is going in. I'll do that for my little cost and schedule tables. I'll look up tables down here, inside and outside, for both of those. Okay. And don't forget the reason that we've done this, the overall risk score, is for ranking, so that when we do our report, we can rank on order of severity of risk. We're going to do at this stage as well a little bit of protection of this sheet. Okay, so what we want to do is when we protect the sheet, we want to stop people from entering any data into the calculated cells. The calculated cells are the factored cost impact scores. Yes, it's going to be all that lot, and it's also going to be the factored cost schedule impact and score and the overall risk score. So there's 5 columns in total that are calculated, and we want to protect them because nobody ever needs to type into those. It could damage the formula if so, and prevent the formulas being calculated correctly. So the way I'm going to do that first of all is just do a quick check. I'm going to highlight all the cells and just right click and have a look at their state. So have a look at the format cells and protection. I've got a mix of cells here that are being locked or unlocked. But if I clear that, it's going to stop any of the cells from being locked on protection. So that's a good starting point. Now I can go back in and I can choose those ones that I don't want people to edit. So I can highlight all those cells that we talked about just now. And I can right click in any of them, go to format cells, and I can select locked, so that when I protect the sheet, it's going to lock those cells and stop people from editing them. Okay, so that's done. Now I'm going to select protect sheet just to test this risk. I'm going to use risk as my password. Entering it again. Okay, and then I'm going to test this. If I try and type something in here, had to wait for the noise to finish there, but if I try to type something into one of these calculated cells, I get a warning now. So it's preventing me to go in there without unprotecting the sheet, which I can go back in at any time, select unprotect sheet, and use the password risk. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm going to hide some columns now, and I'm going to hide those columns that the team don't need to see. And in fact, the PM probably doesn't need to see them either, because they are the calculated scores that are used to rank the risks. There's no need for you to know them. You just need to know initial setup. You need to set these ranking tables up properly down here. Okay, so I'm going to hide these so it's less for people to worry about when they're looking at these tables. So I'm going to hide that column and hide these 2 columns just by selecting the columns and then saying hide. Might need to make sure risks the sheet is unprotected before you do that, because it probably wouldn't let you hide them if not. So that makes it a much smaller table. You know, it's a simple risk register, and it's a nice one that the team can work through. You can see the cost data in green. You can see the scheduled data in pink, and that's going to work a lot better. I do note that my schedule impact probability is not showing, so I've made a mistake there. I'm just going to unhide that. And I want to see that, so yeah, that's fine now. I've got those 6 columns that I'm interested in there now. And I like the fact that the justification sits right in the middle, because it will apply to both the cost impact or the schedule impact. So it's quite nice that the eye is looking down the middle of these estimates here. Okay. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the reporting feature. We want to generate a report for the more senior stakeholders. It simplifies what data is being presented. They're just going to be interested in seeing the factored cost impact. How much contingency funds are going to be asked for at the project concept and then throughout the project, and how much schedule is calculated in order to set the correct timelines for the project. So in order to do that, we're going to use something called Power Query. So if I select any of the cells, I can then go into data, and then I use this button from table stroke range, and it's going to use the data from this table to start up the Power Query editor. So this is the Power Query editor, and it's showing me all the different columns from the table I've been working at, and that's good because I need to use some of those columns that I hid in order to display the risks in the correct ranking order. So what I'm going to do is the first thing I am going to do is I'm going to rank these risks, and that's determined by my overall risk score. So I click on this filter button on the risk score, and then I'm going to sort descending, and as we can see, it's switched those risks around and it's ranked them in order of risk severity there. You can see the steps changing on the right hand side as I've sorted the rows. Another good cleanup tool is to remove any rows that have got a null value in, and the nulls are equating to these empty rows down here that have been made for people to enter data into. But if there's null rows in there, we don't want to see them in the report. So what we can do is filter them right out from the start just by selecting this ID and filter out the nulls there. That's also quite good, it's going to prevent people from not entering a risk ID. So it means that when you create a risk, it must have a unique ID. So it's serving two functions. So I'm going to filter out the nulls. You see it's cleaned up. It's cleaned up all the nulls there. Now I actually want to select the columns that I'm interested in. So I'm going to have the ID, I want the name, I want the description. I'm not worried about too much of the other detail other than the factored cost impact and the factored schedule impact. Those are the only things I'm interested in my final report. So I'm going to select those columns and remove all the other columns. You're not losing them at all from your original spreadsheet, you're just losing them from the report this is going to generate. So I'm now going to use this remove columns feature, and I'm going to remove the columns I haven't selected. You can see there now I've just got 5 columns that I'm interested in. So now I think we're ready to go to the report preview. So I'm going to close and load this. And you can see it's just now presenting me with the data that I'm interested in a new tab. My original risks data is sat behind this, and my new table is here in a new tab. Interesting, over on the right hand side, if ever you change the data in the risk register, you just need to left click on this refresh button here, and it will refresh the data in the table and present the new report. But we need to do a little bit of housekeeping on the report to make it read nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and insert some blank rows at the top. Okay. And in this case, what I'm doing is I'm actually going to put an image in here. But you might prefer to manage this from the header and footer feature. It might be an easy way to do it, but this is putting in a nice sort of image for your report. Things we're going to be interested in are the name of the report. So this is a basic risk register. Okay. It's going to have a project number or project. Project name. In this case, Darios. Okay. Now we're going to do a little bit more tidying, but the data we're going to be interested in, the high level data, is going to be the cost impact. And the schedule impact. We're interested in these totals. So the cost impact is a sum of the costs, sum the costs. The schedule impact is a sum of the schedule. And let's just tidy this up a little bit using left justification, align left. What we can see is the cost impact is 14,000 watts. So let's make sure this is set in. Well, counting doesn't look very good, but if we put it into currency, it left justifies it. For schedule impacts, I haven't got a format that says weeks, but what I can do is jump into this number format. It's just a little button there next to the number feature of the toolbar. So you just click into that, and you're going to create a custom function. Now the nearest digit or nearest sample type is 0. It's a number without any decimal places. But we're going to add to that now by putting in the text you want to appear after the number. In this case, weeks. You can call it anything you want, but just important to contain it in speech marks. Okay, so it's going to present that schedule impact in weeks now. So I've got my highlighted numbers. These are the most important things of this report. So I'm going to put them, I'm going to increase the size of the text there, and I'm going to put it in bold. Also the project name. You know, if they want to know 3 things, they want to know the project name, what's the cost impact, what's the schedule impact. Those are the 3 things they're going to be interested in. They can delve down deeper as need be after that. Okay, so a few other little bits, little tricks to tidy this up is just to pull out these rows to a nice size and wrap the text. Yeah, just get that, and don't forget you can just double click in between the rows for that to automatically size the rows. Yeah, you just double click in between. Now what we can do is just make sure everything's justified in the same way. We can go top align, and then we can go align left. It just presents everything in exactly the same format. It's not a good idea to change the formatting of anything within the cells, because every time you refresh the query, it's going to regenerate that data. But you can change the general lookout of the table. So now, just to make sure my report's going to print nicely, I'm going to go File, Print. And you can see it's not set up properly at the moment, but if I go to the scaling, the page setup scaling function, I can choose to fit all the columns on one page. And you can see there now, as I build my risk register, it's going to just populate this screen nicely. It's going to show all my risks in order of severity with a nice clear total sum at the top. One last thing that's worth doing is just for cosmetics, just get the table colours the same as the logo or your company colours. So just click anywhere in the table for that and click on table design, and you get a whole bunch of pre-selected formats, so you can look at which one most closely matches your logo and supplements it nicely. So just looking through there, I used orange at the start. I don't like the orange there. Let's have another look. No, I don't really want grey over the text. So you just have a look through here, play around with them, see which ones look the best. I think I like this one the best to go with the logo. So that's just a little tidy up at the end that's worth doing. Hope you've enjoyed the video and look forward to your comments and collaboration. Thank you.